1,000 horses, and millions of horses have lived on Earth throughout history, and hopefully millions more will live in the future. Therefore, my conclusion, which is categorical and universal, that this is the nature of horse anatomy. So in any inductive argument like that, the conclusion will claim more information than is provided in the premises. And so you can call that faith, and yes, I would say faith is a constant. However, at what point does faith turn to knowledge? Because you can say that no matter what anyone claims, you can always doubt it. Well, what if tomorrow is not true? What if you say that, let's say, Krishna is God, but tomorrow you wake up and something happened and it turned out there was a more powerful being somewhere in a parallel universe that no one saw coming, and Krishna was blindsided by this parallel deity. So you can always come up with something, but at what point is it a reasonable skepticism? So you can take skepticism as a permanent, irrevocable state of consciousness, that one must always be skeptical and one can never transcend skepticism. Now, the way out, by the way, according to Aristotle, and I agree with him, that's very big of me, but anyway, what Aristotle says about this is that for any claim you make, religious, scientific, who's going to win the next World Series, for any claim you make, you can be pushed into an infinite regress of proofs. For example, let's say you claim water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. I'm really stretching my knowledge of science here. I think water boils at... I'm using all my scientific weapons here. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. So let's say someone doubts it. I don't believe that. Okay, you put a pot of water in the stove, throw a thermometer in the pot, turn the fire on. And 100 degrees, ping, it boils. Now, what if someone says, do you think I'm going to believe that's pure water? Do you think I'm going to believe that's real mercury? Nice try. So, okay, bring in the water testing chemicals. Bring in the mercury testing chemicals. I don't believe those are real water testing chemicals. Obviously, so you can always push someone into an infinite regress of proofs. Aristotle, the father of modern logic, claims that the way to escape an infinite regress of proofs, and pretty much is also the view today in contemporary epistemology, that someone always wants to be the game spoiler, but I think generally common sense, foundationalism. The way to escape this is that you have to assert that there is a fact of the matter which is self-evident. Because it proves itself, there is no need, in fact, there's in a sense no possibility, of bringing in an extrinsic corroborating fact because it's self-evident. For example, the common example, you can't hold a candle to the sun. Because the sun is the source of our visibility, so we have no power to illumine the sun because it's the brightest thing out there. So, if someone claims, for example, in the spiritual field, let's say someone claims, I had a spiritual experience, I saw the light or whatever, and if this person claims that the nature of the experience was such that I cannot rationally doubt it, that if I rationally doubt it, I am actually moving from a higher state of awareness, I'm giving up a state of greater clarity, greater cognitive transparency, greater awareness, and simply almost pro forma, because there's some obligation to go through a logical exercise. I'm doubting it, not because I have a real good reason to doubt it, but because somehow I feel I'm required to do so. And so then where do you go? Now, of course, we know that people have claimed to have rock-solid religious experiences and then proceed to do really bad things, like massacre other people. And so somehow or other, and what this gets to is sort of also what's going to have to give way here to follow this logical trail. What's going to have to give way is a certain type of almost like solipsistic politically correct relativism, where, like, for example, we say that, well, if that works for you, then that's your truth. If that works for you. So the idea that people can own subjective truths, like, do you do that, let's say, in a science environment? Like, let's say someone just does a sloppy proof, or just their numbers don't add up or something. Do other scientists or mathematicians say, well, Bob, if that works for you, if that's your equation. So if it's the case, let's do a hypothetical here. If it's the case that there is a spiritual reality, and therefore, among other things, our gut level intuition that some things are really right and wrong, like gratuitously, cruelly harming innocent people is somehow bad, and rather, acts of compassion and love of kindness somehow are really objectively good, or that there is such a thing as justice, it's not just our imagination, and that therefore justice is worth struggling for, that some things really are beautiful. I'm not just wired to fantasize that something which is absolutely no more beautiful than anything else is beautiful. That art is real, that there really is such a thing as beauty, as justice, and so on and so forth. Then if it is the fact that there is a spiritual reality, and if we are made in such a way, if we exist in such a way that we are capable, under favorable, appropriate circumstances, to become aware of that, the old logos idea, then, in fact, we can have certain knowledge, even though, according to the rules of certain epistemological games, we can't demonstrate it. For example, when Einstein discovered some of his discoveries, no redundancy there. I actually, in an astronomy textbook I read when I was an undergraduate, they published this article in the New York Times, where the New York Times interviewed the head of the Royal Astronomy organization in England, I forget the exact name. And the guy, the Royal Astronomer of England, I guess the Astronomer Royal or something, he was trying to explain to the New York Times reporter that there is no way to explain this to a layman or layperson. There is no way to explain this. It cannot be made intelligible, it cannot be simplified, and yet it's true. And somehow, within the hierarchy of knowledge, because the people that know about these things accepted Einstein, therefore it became a fact for the scientific world. It was not required that people in general understand it. That was not a requirement. And it is not a requirement in science. That people in general without scientific training also get it. That's not a requirement. And yet, the science world sometimes places a requirement in the spiritual area that spiritual claims must be demonstrated to people who have no training spiritually. It seems to me, to quote George W. Bush, that's not a level playing field. And if you say the difference is that in science we do practical things. I mean, look at it. We do things. The lights are on. The planes are flying. People are being cured of diseases. Okay, all true and all important. I'm very happy to tip my hat to that. But in the spiritual field, again, maybe we'll just sort of resurrect the spiritual religious dichotomy here. Not talking about people that claim all kinds of things and do all kinds of bad things, but people who claim they've had real spiritual experiences. Why do those things have to be demonstrated to those who have no interest in undergoing what are considered to be appropriate methods and procedures to elevate consciousness and to have access to higher states of consciousness and, let's say, higher metaphysical aspects of reality? Why is it only in science that it's just for the specialists and just for the people who have, paid their dues and studied these things? So again, level playing field. So yes, faith is a constant.
My question addresses separation of spirituality and, let's say, our political. It's really addressing social media. So we've seen an uprising in social media and politics over the last couple of years, and how it's had an impact on that. How do you feel social media or do you feel social media is going to help or hurt spirituality and separating the demilitarizing in a sense?
As someone who is not on Facebook or Twitter or any other social media. What? Oh, that's not me. That's people who. It was their idea, not mine. I think it's like anything else. It's a power. It's a power. It's a facility, and that can be used for any purpose, good or bad.
Do you feel our laws, not just here in the U.S. but around the world, are too tied in to some of the religious books around the world to really segregate that?
I think America is, there still is tremendous opportunity to attempt to share what you consider to be important truths in this country. And so whatever the situation is with social media, I think that I think in one sense there's never been a better time to try to teach things that are worth teaching in this country. And so I'm signing myself up, trying to help and do my part.
Okay, you have
Perhaps one more question? Or?
one question.
And then, I'm sorry. This is a typical trick, of religious organizations. They promise food, but then we have a dinner for everybody, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to stop after this question. So then after this question, if anyone else, I'd be very happy to talk to any of you, and we can deliver the dinner for this promise.
Yeah, hi. As it's the last question, I'll take the liberty of speaking a little more. As a Stanford grad, I'm sorry about your school choices, Cal and Howard.
I know.
My question was, how do you differentiate spirituality from religion? Because we talked about a lot where I got confused between the use of religion and spirituality in your lectures.
I would refer to one of the most renowned scholars of comparative religion in the 20th century, Houston Smith, who I happened to read an article he wrote in a Buddhist magazine called Tricycle. When I first saw it on the coffee table, I thought it was something about like bicycles or something, but then I realized it was a Buddhist magazine. And he made a very good point. I thought he made a very good point, and that is that even if we say that the ultimate goal is to be in spiritual consciousness, not merely to perform rituals and stuff like that, it would be perhaps imprudent to sever completely religion from spirituality for the following reason. If we consider religiosity to include certain moral requirements, such as, for example, typically in Asian traditions, in Hinduism and Buddhism, and certainly in Jainism, not in every last iteration of them, but for the most part, there is a religious requirement to nonviolence toward living creatures. Actually, the word nonviolence, the Sanskrit word is ahimsa, is sometimes misunderstood. It technically doesn't mean nonviolence. There's a verb, hinks, and then the word hingsa, and then of course, not hingsa is ahimsa. But the word hingsa really means to harm an innocent person. To harm an innocent person. So let's say someone was attacking your family, and you defended your family, and unavoidably you injured the other person because there's no other way to protect your family. That would not be considered hingsa. So hingsa really means harming an innocent person, including non-humans, because these great cultures were not what I call speciesist. I mean, there's racist, there's sexist, there's speciesist. It's all the same thing. It's believing that people whose bodies aren't like your body have no rights. So, so that moral requirement, I think is good. I think it was a good moral requirement. Or that, for example, let's say a teacher, a yogi, a rishi, a Buddhist monk is trying to teach that we are not the body. The real, of course, Buddhism had a slightly different take, although Mahayana Buddhism kind of came back around to something like this. But anyway, take the Vedanta side, the yoga side, the teaching that there is an eternal self within the body, and therefore we should not allow our consciousness to be dragged into bodily hedonism, because we're going to lose our power to understand the non-material self within. Therefore, someone claiming to be a spiritual teacher, someone claiming to be showing the people their real spiritual self inside the body, should not themselves be addicted to bodily gratification, should not be shamelessly promiscuous. You know, you shouldn't have to kind of pick that person up and carry them home from the bar every night. If that person is teaching that it's really about the soul, not the body. So, if you sever religion from spirituality, what it does is, and even if you take religiosity to be, let's say, observable behavior, certain kinds of observable behaviors, then you have no objective, to the extent that, you know, it's objective to observe behavior. You have no objective way to correlate someone's claims about themselves with their actual state of consciousness. Even if you take their, let's say, supposed higher state of consciousness to be the spiritual part, but if their observable behavior is quite contradictory, it's the religious failing to follow certain moral principles that kind of exposes the spiritual hypocrisy. And if you sever the religiosity from the spirituality, we find, all over the place in our culture, all kinds of people raising it, yeah, I'm spiritual. I mean, you try to boil that down, like, and what exactly do you mean by that? It just comes down sort of like the Beach Boy vibration. You know, good vibrations. It's like the Beach Boy concept of spirituality. Good, got to keep those good vibrations happening to me. So, that's why I think that we should be careful. It's like, like at a certain point in time, people thought, you don't need this organ. Whoops, maybe you did need that organ. So, religiosity, the ultimate goal would be spirituality, but they both have their uses. And that, of course, I give credit to that. When I read that article by Houston Smith, it really got me thinking about that, and so I want to give credit to him for that. So perhaps we'll proceed to the next part of our